Our speaker this evening knows something about being a student in extraordinary times. Dr. Cleve Francis earned his master's degree at William & Mary in the late 1960s. He pursued cardiology and music, classic William & Mary ampersand, a Renaissance man. Dr. Francis founded Mount Vernon Cardiology Associates in Northern Virginia, and in 1995, he formed the Black Country Music Association. There's so many ways that you can listen to his music, and you should get out there and do that. We are so honored to host Dr. Francis, his wife Hardeep, and many Williamsburg area friends during our Year of the Arts. Please welcome Dr. Francis.
Good evening. Thank you, President Rowe, for that introduction and for inviting me to be part of this momentous occasion. Because of the heat and everything, I'll try to keep my remarks short because I understand two magic words audience look forward to hearing. I'm done. I'm delighted and deeply honored to be back on this beautiful and historic campus with all of you who are just beginning your academic journey. You enter this place with talents, skills, and experiences that will enhance the symphony of life here at William & Mary. I invoke the word symphony not only because we're celebrating the Year of the Arts, but because the art of music was such an important part of my time as a student here. From a very young age, music formed the central focus of my life, but it wasn't the reason I came to William & Mary. I enrolled in the biology department's graduate program for study for a career in medicine. I studied with Professor Garnet Jack Brooks and conducted research to determine the evolutionary function of the third eye of a small southwestern fence lizard. How's that for a research project? We found out what it was used for. Through science and music, I found my place and my voice in this community. For me, finding my place was no small thing. I'd come from Southern University, the historically Black institution in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. At Southern, 10,000 on campus looked like me, but at William & Mary in 1967, I was one of only 7 Black students on this campus. And maybe some of you today have some of the same worries that I had back then. You might wonder whether you belong here and how you will perform as a student next to all these very smart people. But don't worry. Here at William & Mary, you will have every opportunity to thrive. When I was growing up in a small, segregated town of Jennings, Louisiana, going to college seemed like an impossible dream. My parents were children of sharecroppers. My father worked as a day laborer, and my mother worked as a maid. She didn't have a chance to attend school past the 5th grade, but she instilled a vital life lesson in me and my 5 sisters. Learn as much as you can, she told us. Humble words from a strong, inspiring woman. And those words echoed in my mind when I applied to William & Mary, and I can say without hesitation that this was the best decision I ever made. Had I not attended this university, I would have not been able to pursue my dream of becoming a medical doctor. I would not have established a multicultural cardiology practice, and I would not have been able to help save the lives of hundreds of people over the years. But I also would not have met my dear friend and mentor, the late Dr. Victor Liguori. He was a very popular sociology professor here who became deeply interested in the music I was writing and performing. I called the music soul folk because it was combining two different musical traditions. And he felt strongly that the gift I had should be shared. And he encouraged and assisted me in producing my very first folk album called Follow Me. That album, after 50 years, was discovered and reissued 2 years ago under the name of Beyond the Willow Tree, and is now being shared with music lovers around the world. And I deeply regret that Dr. Liguori did not live to witness this. The year I graduated in 1969, Dr. Liguori helped arrange a concert, Soul Folk in Our Times, right here at Phi Beta Kappa Hall. And my friend David Gapp and I played to a standing room only crowd. I also gained some performing chops by performing here on the campus, in Colonial Williamsburg, and in the Tide Ward area, which would come in handy. And as an artist on Capitol Records, I would appear on stages across America and in Europe. But I want to take you back to the moment, to the warm summer of 1967 when I first set foot on this campus, and tell you my William and Mary story. My story is a coming-of-age tale, but also you will see it is something of a ghost story. I arrived in Williamsburg at the Williamsburg Amtrak train station a half mile from here, lugging a small suitcase, a Bible, a notebook of folk songs I had written, and of course my guitar. Prior to this journey, I'd never stepped foot outside of the state of Louisiana. I didn't know a single person in this town, and I wasn't sure where I was going to sleep that night. But I had a hidden advantage. When I boarded the train in New Orleans, my mother called out. She said, "You'll be fine, just find the church." She knew the Black church to be a vibrant support network like no other, surpassing the Masons, the Toastmasters, and any fraternity or sorority in the known world. I found that to be true. When I arrived in Williamsburg, I was taken in by the good folks at the First Baptist Church just a few blocks from here on Scotland Street. And they quickly adopted me as one of their own. The pastor there, Reverend David Collins, discovered that I was also a singer and invited me to sing spirituals before and after his Sunday sermons. When I first ventured onto the William and Mary campus, the Wren building was the first building I saw. It is, as you know, the oldest college building still in use in the United States. So much of what happened in the early story of our nation happened in the shadows of this building and in the surrounding territory. Many times while I was a student here, when I'd finished my work, I would come and sit on these very steps and scan the immediate courtyard. And I would also look down Duke of Gloucester Street, far beyond the storefronts, the people, and the sights and sounds of cars. I was actually looking for ghosts. Ghostly presences, real or imagined, ectoplasmic or metaphorical, have been part of my life since the beginning. See, I was born with a thin membrane covering my face known as a caul or a veil. A caul, spelled C-A-U-L, is a harmless membrane and is part of the amniotic sac. The midwife or the doctor simply removes it, and there's no damage or lasting effects. But in cultures all over the world, superstitions have arisen around babies who are born with the caul. It is said to occur 1 out of 85,000 births and is traditionally associated with good luck. But however, in Louisiana folklore, the caul was not regarded as a lucky charm at all. Those who were born with the veil had the supernatural ability to see ghosts. As I grew up, my parents, aunts, uncles delighted in reminding me that I would be able to see ghosts for the rest of my life. This was not my superpower of choice. In fact, I was horrified. My grandmother seemed to know a lot about ghosts, used to try and calm my fears by telling me, she said, you might see them in the late evenings, but you don't bother them, they won't bother you. So being haunted was my destiny, supposedly, whether I liked it or not. I grew up to be a man of science, and as a man of science, I will officially proclaim that I'd never seen a ghost. I had never seen a ghost, but my upbringing in Louisiana made me more attuned to the possibility that the spirit world did exist. So when I arrived here in Williamsburg, using my ghost whisperer skills, I discovered that Williamsburg and William and Mary were chock full of incredible, monumental, amazing historical ghosts. And suddenly I wanted to see them. So sitting on these various steps, I could imagine the sights and sounds of those who occupied this space long before I did. I could see the nation's story unfolding like a painting on a massive canvas, accompanied by an elaborate musical score. Far beyond Duke of Gloucester Street, staring into the mist of the past, I could see the ghost of Native Americans living here long before any of these buildings existed. Echoes sounded of the drums and chants of the Chickahominy, the Mattaponi, and the Pamunkey tribes as they hunted and danced on these grounds. In the far distance, I could picture the ghost of English men and boys arriving in Jamestown in 1607. 6 miles from here, where we are now, they built a fort to establish the first permanent English settlement in North America. And also from the steps of this building, I could conjure images of the White Lion, a 160-ton English privateer ship that in late August of 1619 anchored 30 miles from here at Point Comfort. The White Lion traveled up the James River carrying African men, women, and children who had been kidnapped from their villages, torn from their homelands, and sold into slavery. And I could see the ghost of my ancestors and their descendants as they labored on Virginia plantations for over 300 years. We now have a memorial at William and Mary called the Hearth to commemorate the enslaved Africans who helped build and cared for this institution of higher learning. After the American colonies declared independence from Great Britain in 1776, they fought for the freedom to create a new nation. And from these steps, I could see the ghost of British soldiers in their bright red coats marching down Duke of Gloucester Street in January 1781 during the Revolutionary War. 10 months later, the Continental Army would then march and defeat the British at Yorktown, only 11 miles from here. From my view on these steps, I can tell you that the ghost of Americans' political history still roam this courtyard where we're gathered today. Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, James Monroe, and John Marshall all were students here. The actions and impacts of these great American leaders can be felt today. But it was Thomas Jefferson who wrote the phrase, "All men are created equal." These 5 words are enshrined in the Declaration of Independence. Today we understand those words to mean all persons, not just men, are created equal. But not everyone in the new nation agreed on the meaning of those words, and more than 600,000 Americans would die in the Civil War from 1861 to 1865. From the steps of the Wren Building, on late evenings, I could see the ghost of Confederate soldiers marching down Duke of Gloucester, later to be replaced by victorious Union Army. Abraham Lincoln would sign the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, leading to a constitutional amendment abolishing slavery. But despite the outcome of the Civil War, the struggle for freedom and equal rights continued. 100 years later, I could hear the choir at the First Baptist Church singing, "Deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday." Then I could see Dr. Martin Luther King walking up the steps when he visited First Baptist Church in 1962. And I was a student here, and I sat on those same steps at First Baptist the sad night in 1968 when Dr. King perished from an assassin's bullet. Martin Luther King had believed in the words of Thomas Jefferson and had challenged the country to live up to them. Now he had become one of the ghost monumental figures of history, one whose example I would follow for the rest of my life. Because of Dr. King's work, the Civil Rights Act would be signed in 1964, opening the door for students like me to attend William and Mary. So in the summer of 1967, a 22-year-old black kid from Jennings, Louisiana, by the name of Cleveland Francis Jr., would get off a train in Williamsburg carrying a small Bible, a guitar, a notebook of folk songs, a dream, and a letter of admission to William and Mary. It was here, inspired by all the great ghosts I just told you about, that I would continue to write my own story and dedicate my life to learning, healing, teaching, and music. I would also forever champion the principles of equality that Thomas Jefferson espoused so many years ago. You can say, I have spent my life not with a call, but with a calling. Jefferson was not a perfect person. Few of us are. But the truth embedded in that phrase, that all people should be treated equally, is a promise that we can and should embrace. The ghost insists on it. The education you will receive at William and Mary may or may not provide you with a calling, because a calling can only come from within you. Just as I did on these steps of this great building, I challenge you to find a moment to look far beyond where you are right now and allow your creative imagination to place your life and your calling within the context of history. As my grandmother said about ghosts, they can't see you, but you can see them. Among the ghosts of the past, you may be able to see that true essence of a life well lived, to give your life a personal sense of meaning, of what makes you you. Why are you here? Not here in the courtyard of this grand building, but in this wonderful world of ours. The saga of America is still being written. Consider how you can add to that story and improve the lives of those who will follow. In closing, one of my mentors at Southern University, Dr. Hugh Perkins, gave me a challenge that I carried with me to William and Mary, and I will now pass it on to you. Dr. Perkins addressed a crowd gathering of new students just like this one. I know what the university brings to you, he said, but what did you bring to us? We seek to discover what you have brought to this school, whatever that might be. To answer that question, I challenge each of you to use your own talents, skills, experiences, and the things you will learn here at William and Mary to venture forward and write your own stories in art, science, law, government, business, technology, entertainment, sports, of fields and possibilities not yet imagined. And add your story as a chapter in the book still being written about yourself, about America, and about the whole human community. Good luck to each of you. Thank you. I'm done.